In 1926, the United States did something quietly radical. It tried to stitch together a modern nation with a numbered web of roads. Before that, Americans navigated a patchwork of named trails, often promoted by private associations, marked inconsistently and maintained unevenly. The new U.S. highway system promised order. Out of that administrative act came a road that would become far larger than its asphalt. U.S. Highway 66. Not the longest route, not the first transcontinental corridor, and not even the most strategically important in federal planning. Yet it became the most mythologized. As the Route 66 Centennial approaches, the most meaningful stops aren't mile markers or photo ops. They are turning points in American history. Moments when this road functioned as infrastructure, as lifeline, as billboard, as battleground, and finally, as memory. The first must-see stop is the moment of naming itself, 1926, when 66 enters the public record. The number was not inevitable. Early proposals for the Chicago-Los Angeles corridor carried other designations, and the final figure owed as much to politics and publicity as to cartography. Cyrus Avery of Tulsa, often called the father of Route 66, understood that a road needed a story to survive budgets and bureaucracy. 66 was short, rhythmic, and easy to remember. In an era when roads were becoming brands, that mattered. Route 66 began as an idea made legible, a line on a map that promised continuity across 8 states, linking industrial cities, farm towns, and desert crossings into a single narrative of motion. The second stop arrives almost immediately after, the long, grinding work of making the road real. Route 66 was designated in 1926, but for years it was not fully paved. It was, in many stretches, a mixture of concrete, gravel, dirt, and optimism. That gap between designation and completion reveals a crucial truth about American modernization. The map often came before the material. Local governments, state highway departments, and federal agencies negotiated responsibilities, and communities argued over alignments because alignment meant commerce. A road that bypassed a town could drain it. A road that ran through could remake it. Route 66's early decades were defined by this tug-of-war between the ideal of a unified national corridor and the local realities of land, labor, and money. The third stop is the road's first great cultural transformation, the rise of automobile tourism in the 1930s. Route 66 did not invent the road trip, but it industrialized it. As cars became more reliable and middle-class ownership expanded, the road created a new economy of motion: motor courts, diners, service stations, roadside cabins, neon signs, and the architecture of persuasion. Buildings shaped like teepees or animals, because speed demanded instant recognition. This was more than kitsch. It was an entrepreneurial response to a new kind of traveler, one who moved fast, expected convenience, and spent money in small increments. Route 66 became a laboratory where Americans learned to consume the landscape from behind a windshield. The fourth stop is the Dust Bowl migration, which turned Route 66 into a corridor of survival. In the mid-1930s, drought and economic collapse pushed thousands of families out of Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and surrounding regions. Many headed west toward agricultural work in California, traveling on what came to be called the Mother Road, a phrase popularized by John Steinbeck in The Grapes of Wrath. Steinbeck's novel fixed an image in the national imagination: battered cars loaded with possessions, families chasing rumors of work, and a road that offered both hope and humiliation. The historical reality was messy and often brutal. Migrants faced hostility, exploitation, and policing. But Route 66 served as a physical thread, connecting environmental disaster to demographic change. It is hard to understand 20th century California, or the politics of migration and labor, without recognizing how this road helped move people at a scale the nation had rarely seen. The fifth stop is World War II, when Route 66 shifted from leisure route to strategic artery. The war mobilized the American interior, and highways became conduits for troops, equipment, and industrial output. Route 66 linked manufacturing centers and military installations, and it carried workers toward defense plants and training bases. Gas rationing and tire shortages constrained civilian travel, but the road's importance did not diminish. It changed character. The same roadside businesses that had catered to tourists adapted to soldiers and war workers. This period underscores a theme often missed in nostalgic retellings. Route 66 was not only a symbol of freedom, it was also a tool of the state, serving national logistics and wartime discipline. The sixth stop is the post-war boom, when Route 66 became a stage for prosperity and a mirror of its contradictions. After 1945, car culture exploded. Families took vacations on newly affordable wages. Motels multiplied. Neon became a language of competition, and roadside food standardized into recognizable regional chains and, eventually, national franchises. Yet this era also reveals who benefited and who was excluded. Segregation and discrimination shaped travel profoundly. For many Black Americans, the open road was not automatically liberating. It could be dangerous. The Green Book, a guide listing safer businesses and lodging, became essential. Route 66, celebrated as a democratic ribbon of pavement, also ran through the realities of Jim Crow and sundown towns. Any honest Centennial story has to hold both truths at once: the road as promise, and the road as a map of unequal access to that promise. The seventh stop is the 1956 Federal Aid Highway Act and the birth of the interstate era, the policy decision that began Route 66's long unmaking. The interstate system was engineered for speed, defense, and efficiency. Limited access roads that bypassed downtowns and eliminated stoplights. These design choices saved time and lives, but they also redirected economic gravity. Towns that had lived on through traffic watched it vanish. Route 66 did not die in a single year. It was slowly replaced, segment by segment, by I-55, I-44, I-40, I-15, and other corridors. This shift marks a broader transformation in American life, from local main streets to highway exits, from roadside individuality to standardized interchange economies. Route 66 became, in effect, a casualty of the very modernity it helped pioneer. The eighth stop is 1985, when Route 66 was officially removed from the U.S. highway system. That decommissioning is often misunderstood as an ending. In fact, it was a beginning of a different kind. Route 66 transitioned from infrastructure to heritage. Once the shield signs came down, communities and enthusiasts began to fight for the road's memory, sometimes to preserve buildings, sometimes to revive economies, sometimes simply to keep a story from dissolving. The road's afterlife shows how Americans create history in real time. A route that had been practical became symbolic, and symbolism, in turn, became a form of economic strategy. Preservation groups formed, historic designations proliferated, and the idea of Route 66 became portable, something that could be marketed, narrated, and reassembled from surviving fragments. The ninth stop is the global Route 66 phenomenon, a cultural export that reveals the power of American mythmaking. By the late 20th century, Route 66 had become internationally recognizable through novels, films, television, photography, and popular music. Bobby Troupe's Get Your Kicks on Route 66, first recorded in 1946, helped cement the road as a rhythmic itinerary in the public mind. Later, television series and movies turned it into shorthand for personal reinvention. Even animated pop culture, stories that place Route 66 imagery into fictional worlds, helped keep the iconography alive for audiences who had never driven a mile of it. The remarkable twist is that Route 66's legend grew as the road itself fragmented. In cultural terms, the decommissioned highway became more coherent than it ever was as a maintained route. It turned into a narrative people could enter, a ready-made American epic of movement, risk, and self-invention. The 10th stop is the Centennial itself, 1926 to 2026. Not as a birthday party, but as a reckoning with what the road has meant across a century of change. Route 66's legacy is not just nostalgia for chrome and neon. It is a case study in how infrastructure shapes culture, and how culture reshapes infrastructure in return. It carries the story of federal standardization and local boosterism, of environmental catastrophe and migration, of wartime mobilization and post-war consumption, of segregation and the contested meaning of freedom, of policy decisions that create winners and losers, and of preservation efforts that turn the past into a resource. A Centennial invites a harder question than, what did Route 66 look like? It asks, what did Route 66 do? It moved people and goods, yes, but it also moved ideas. It taught Americans to imagine distance as manageable and the nation as traversable. It trained businesses to sell at highway speed. It helped forge the roadside vernacular, signs, slogans, and structures designed to seize attention in seconds. It exposed the uneven geography of rights and safety. And when it was replaced by interstates, it became a lesson in unintended consequences. Progress that streamlines travel can also hollow out communities built around older patterns of movement. Route 66 endures because it contains a paradox at the heart of modern America. It is celebrated as an emblem of individual freedom, yet it was born from government numbering, sustained by public investment, and ultimately displaced by federal policy. It is remembered as a continuous road, yet it has always been a mosaic, rerouted, repaved, bypassed, and pieced together in memory. In that sense, Route 66 is not merely a highway from Chicago to Los Angeles. It is a century-long argument over what America is, a place of local particularity or national uniformity, a promise of mobility or a reminder of who gets to move safely, a story told in steel and concrete, or one told in songs, novels, and the stubborn will to remember. The Centennial is an invitation to treat Route 66 not as a relic, but as a historical lens. Follow it carefully, and it leads to the great themes of the 20th century: migration, war, consumption, inequality, policy, and reinvention, and into the 21st, where heritage and identity become forms of power. A road once built to connect places now connects eras, reminding a modern audience that the most influential routes in history are not only the ones that carry traffic, but the ones that carry meaning.